now, let's break down the main diplomatic battle of the week, which put the reputation of the United States in the world on the line. Because right now, President Trump's decision will determine whether America is considered a reliable partner at all, which will, of course, also affect its economy. What is currently known about the suspension of arms deliveries to Ukraine? What are our European partners and we ourselves doing in this situation? And what unexpected danger has caught Russia off guard? TSN correspondent Oksana Tkachenko on the visible and invisible storms of the week.
The news about the suspension of American arms supplies comes to Ukrainians at a less than ideal time. Russia is actively conducting its so-called summer offensive on the front lines, while cities in the rear are experiencing record drone, cruise missile, and ballistic missile attacks.
This is a very bad development for us. I can't imagine what will happen when all the supplies run out completely.
They believe that the U.S. has become an unreliable partner.
The first reports about the suspension of supplies are not coming from official sources, but from anonymous sources in the Western press. The Pentagon has suspended an entire package of military aid, already prepared and packed for shipment in Poland. The reason, supposedly, is to check whether the U.S. Army's own stockpiles have been depleted. There are guided missiles for HIMARS, Hellfire missiles, 155mm shells, and Stingers. But most importantly, dozens of those long-awaited missiles for the Patriot air defense systems. All of this was allocated to Ukraine back when President Biden was still in office. Kiev is, to put it mildly, in shock over the decision, even if they're not showing it. For clarification, the acting U.S. chargé d'affaires in Ukraine, John Hinkle, has been summoned to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The Ukrainian side requested an urgent conversation with the Americans to find out what exactly had happened. The European allies were no less stunned than Kiev. Bloomberg reports that the White House was asked for an official explanation of such a move, and later for a softening of the position, or even its reversal. Germany immediately got involved in the process. The office of Chancellor Friedrich Merz confirmed that they are holding urgent, intensive negotiations about purchasing Patriot systems for Kiev at their own expense.
Unfortunately, the MT system cannot replace an anti-missile, anti-ballistic complex. So, if we have a smaller number of missiles in reserve, we redistribute them. And in certain civilian objects, well, they just don't make it into the priority list.
The main question hanging in the air is, who made this decision and why? Did Trump really personally give the order to stop aid to Ukraine? At first, the person held responsible for freezing the supplies was a certain director of policy at the Department of Defense, Elbridge Colby. One after another, reports are appearing in the American press about confusion among the top U.S. establishment. For State Department employees, security advisors, and members of Congress, this came as a complete surprise. Both parties began to check whether the delay in supplies violated legislation that requires providing security assistance to Ukraine. Later, American NBC News learned that the decision had been made solely by Pentagon Chief Pete Hegseth. Trump was quick to back up his minister.
We haven't suspended anything at all. We are actively supplying weapons, and indeed, we have already provided a significant amount of weaponry. We are diligently working with them and striving to offer assistance. But you see, President Biden has unfortunately emptied out our entire country by giving them so many weapons. And we absolutely need to make sure we have enough for ourselves.
Meanwhile, conspiracy theories started spreading on social media and among analysts. The halt in aid to Ukraine coincided with Putin's summer offensive on the Ukrainian front, and thus it kind of helped to the Kremlin. Another theory is that the halt in supplies is fulfilling Russia's demands for a ceasefire. Another version is that the scandal around the arms embargo was meant to make it easier for Trump to negotiate appeasement with the aggressor. Moreover, there wasn't just one phone call. For the first time in 3 years, French President Emmanuel Macron called Putin. No miracle happened. The Russian leader made it clear to both of them that he would not back down from his aggressive goals in Ukraine. And to the US president, Putin basically spat in his face because the air raid alert in Ukraine started while the two leaders were still on the phone. And it was that very night that a record attack on Kyiv took place, clearly timed for the United States Independence Day. The head of the White House does not hide his disappointment with the conversation and admits that there has been no progress in the peace talks.
I am very disappointed with today's conversation with President Putin. I'm just saying, I don't think he wants to stop, and that's very bad.
Putin said no and struck Kyiv. So now, obviously, Trump has to make a decision, first of all, about resuming, if he was involved in all this, about resuming deliveries, allowing their purchase, and allowing Germany to buy and Ukraine, and Germany to buy additional Patriot systems.
The day after the call with Putin, the Ukrainian president has a personal conversation with Trump. Following the talks, he speaks of a positive shift. But having learned from bitter experience, the Ukrainian team has somewhat changed its approach to the current American administration. So instead of just asking for weapons, they decided to offer money for them and share their own technologies.
Today I spoke with President Trump. It was an important conversation. We agreed that our teams would meet to strengthen air defense capabilities. We discussed joint production in great detail. Both we and the Americans need this.
The Washington publication Axios also reports positive feedback from the conversation. Columnist Barak Ravid, who is familiar with the details of the call, says that Trump expressed a desire to help with air defense and to check exactly what and under what circumstances was suspended by his officials. Later, on the plane during a conversation with journalists, Trump shares that he has already threatened Putin with sanctions.
We talk about sanctions a lot, yeah. You know, we talked a lot about sanctions, and he understands that they can be applied.
Obviously, for Putin, these latest final Chinese warnings from Trump are no longer taken seriously. The Wall Street Journal writes, the Kremlin leader has clearly sensed the weakness of the current American administration, and the lack of response to the shelling is perceived as a signal to intensify attacks. Not to mention how delighted the Kremlin was with the decision to freeze weapons supplies to Ukraine, something it had been seeking since the very beginning of the full-scale invasion. In this way, an unprecedented window of opportunity has opened up for Russia. In fact, this summer, as experts from the Institute for the Study of War note, is almost decisive in the context of the offensive against Ukraine. Both analysts and intelligence services insist it is in 2026 that Russia will begin to feel the effects of economic problems.
Here's the most important thing. We are planning to reduce defense spending next year and the year after that, over the next 3 years. That's our plan.
Of course, no one believes him. Cutting war funding is only possible when Putin runs out of money. Something is just making the dictator say these words, and all of Russia's sworn friends can see it clearly. The boss isn't what he used to be. The Kremlin has started to lose its seemingly eternal influence in the South Caucasus. The raids by Russia's FSB on Azerbaijanis in Ekaterinburg, which resulted in 2 deaths and several injuries, have opened a real Pandora's box. The raids were supposedly carried out in connection with unsolved crimes from more than 15 years ago. Ilham Aliyev's response turned out to be catastrophic for the Putin regime. Baku still hasn't recovered from the outrage over the downing of the Azerbaijan Airlines plane last December. 2 anti-aircraft missiles caused the deaths of 38 passengers at that time. Aliyev didn't even get an apology from Putin. So now Baku has started to respond in kind. The country staged a real show of force, detaining 13 Russian citizens. Searches were also conducted at the office of the propaganda agency Sputnik. According to local media, that's exactly where FSB agents were working. In court, the suspects in drug trafficking and cybercrimes appear with faces that have clearly been beaten. There's no reverence for Moscow's greatness or the inviolability of Russians.
With all due respect to Azerbaijan, its history and traditions, if Russia so much as raises an eyebrow.
The war in Ukraine helped Azerbaijan successfully regain control over Nagorno-Karabakh and resolve its differences with Armenia without Russia's mediation. Baku is gradually taking away Moscow's monopoly on supplying energy resources to Europe. Already, the EU has become Azerbaijan's largest trading partner. And on top of that, Ilham Aliyev has managed to secure significant military support from Turkey. He even negotiated the opening of a massive Turkish military base. And this past weekend, the city of Kankendi hosted a real gathering of Turkic leaders. Joining Aliyev and Erdogan were the Prime Minister of Pakistan, as well as the leaders of Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan.
Moscow is no longer the center people turn to for approval. Now it's just a complicated neighbor, one they might listen to, but no longer fear. All of this is happening against the backdrop of war, isolation, and growing competition for influence in the region. Russia is losing its allies.
Peoples once subordinate to Moscow and Russia's strategic partners on paper are making it clear to Putin they are no longer colonies. And it seems that only Russian television still believes that if Putin just raises an eyebrow, everyone will fall back in line. Oksana Tkachenko, TSN, Week 1+1.